Kia ora tātou katoa, ladies and gentlemen, greetings. Max slightly traumatized, I'm highly traumatized. Welcome to you all. If I can, first of all, reply to the words of welcome from Andre and from Mac, and if I can then, I'm really pleased that many of my elders and my people are present here this afternoon, and so concluding my speech of reply to Andre's mihi, I would like to ask my people of Ngāti Wai to join me at the top here to sing the song that will complement my speech of welcome. First of all, if I can speak to you all, first of all in the Reo, and then I'll speak in English. Nā reira tihe wa Māori ora. Kia puta atu I te whaiau ki Te Amorangi. Nā tuatahi māku ko te wehi ke aihoa ki tō tātou matua nui te rangi, te kai manaki, te kai tiro, te kai arataki I a tātou e hi koe mane nenei tātou I runga I te mato tōna whenua. Nā reira mihi atuana ki a koe, Andre, e ara whatangi a tātou ki tō tātou matua nui te rangi. Nā wano I tono atu kia tewi homai o na manakitanga ki runga I tēnei hui no tātou. Nā reira tēnā rā koe mo tēnā wāhanga. Kia koutou rā e te whare puka o Whangārei Terenga Prawa, kalanga mai, mihi mai, whakatau mai, tēnei, kua tae mai nei ki te kōrero kia koutou I tēnei rā. Tangi atu anā hau ki o tātou mate hinga nei runga I o tātou marae maha huri noa, ko tahi anō te kōrero haere koutou e ngā mate, haere koutou. Ka whakaoke mai ngā rārangi kōrero kia tātou te kanohi o rei noho nei, tēnā koutou. First of all, if I, in paying acknowledgments to Andre's words of blessing and to acknowledge Andre for that. Secondly, I want to pay my respects to all those of our relatives, friends, confreres and associates who have passed away in the months and in the days and in the weeks gone by, and I bid those people fond farewell and peaceful rest. And thirdly is to tell everybody how delighted I am in spite of my trauma to be here in front of you all today and to speak to you today. I'm really pleased for that. And so my kōrero to you all today is about, is as the title says, tōku hau kainga, or my home place. And so I just want to speak a little bit about, when I come into that kōrero, to speak a little bit about Whangārei Terenga Prawa, about the people, the Māori communities who live here, and also where they're located, and some of the history, the Māori history that is in Whangārei Terenga Prawa here. So just with those few words is to reply to both Andre and to Mac for your words of welcome, and nā reira e koutou ma tēnā koutou. If I can ask my Ngāti Wai people to come forward to support with the waiata.
Goodbye. Whistling.
Tira e tātou mā, ngā rārangi mau, ngā tū te ao, tū te pō, ngā rārangi tāngata, ka heke, ka heke, ka heke. Nā reira huri noa I roto I a tātou kua mahu e mai muri nei, tēnā koutou, kia ora mai tātou. Kia ora. Tēnā koutou e te iwi.
Okay. Excuse me.
So that song, ladies and gentlemen, is a song sung by the tribes of the north and describes all the mountains that make up the tribal territory of the Tai Tokerau. So within that song you would have heard the different mountains named, and especially our mountain out here on the harbour here at Manaya. And I think that that's a good introduction, I think, in terms of being able to talk about my home place, tōku hau kainga, because probably the most prominent, although some people might want to argue with me about this, one of the most prominent tribal nations in the north, of course, is the Ngāpuhi nation, of which the Ngātiwai people are very closely related. And of course the mountain Rākau which stands on the southern entrance into the Bay of Islands, is the mountain which the Ngātiwai people will claim as their emblem, in the same way that us Whangārei people claim Manaya as our emblem. So that brings us into that home space that I want to talk about today. Yeah. So probably you won't be able to see some of these. I'm just wondering, are we able to dim these lights? So this here is a map that points out the Whangārei district. And the Whangārei district, you know, whilst we'll clearly identify ourselves with the Whangārei township. But the Whangārei district takes in all of that area there, you know, from the Te Huringo or Kaharo, or the Brenduin Ranges, all the way up into the border on the Ngāti Hine lands to Motatau, over to the other side there, over to near towards the Bay of Islands, which is where the mountain Rako Mangamanga is, and then of course back down to Manaia. Now, I call that my home place because within that area are my immediate relatives and are places which I had spent time in my childhood and in my youth with my relatives in all those different villages there, and of course my tribal connections are not confined within within those borders there, but will even extend out into Ngāti Whātua on the Kaipara and in the Dargaville area. We'll go up into the Ngāti Hine lands, and of course the Ngāti Way area along the eastern seaboard. So when we have a look at this map here, you can see where the different Maori communities have been identified. So down on in the Ruakaka Marsden Point end is Takahiwai, and there we've named some of the tribes there, namely Patuharakeke. When we come inland coming back into Whangārei, just south of town is Te Toitoi, and a very old village that is, and some of our people are still living there in Te Toitoi. At one time there were two marae there in that village, and that village is occupied by the Parafo people. When we go back out onto the coast to Pātaua, and there are the tribes of Ngāti Korora and Te Waiariki. When we go further on up the coast to Ngunguru, we'll come to the people of Ngāti Wai, to the Ngāti Taka tribe, to the Te Waiariki tribe, and when I say Te Waiariki, I'm speaking about the Waiariki Hapu. Although all those people on the eastern seaboard there can claim themselves to belong to or will identify their Waiariki people as a tribal group, as a main tribal group. When we go further on up the coast, we'll come to Motopodi and to the people of Te Whānau Orangi Whakahu. Further on again will bring us to Whananaki and to the Whānau Whero people, to the Ngāti Rehua people, to the Ngāti Te Akitai and Te Ure Whakapiko people who are in there, and I'm really pleased and greatly delighted that some of the Whananaki people are able to be here with us today. When we carry on further on up north, we'll come into the Whangaruru area and into Moko, where the marae is at Moko, and the people of Te Uri o Hikihiki. So that's a group of the wider Ngāti Wai people. At the top end there, you can see where we'll be going into Bland Bay, which once again is a Ngāti Wai area, and before you go down into Bland Bay, you'll go through the Ngaiotonga village, which is also occupied by Ngāti Wai, but especially by the Ngāti Tautahi sub-tribe. When we come around, you'll see that there's another marae there called Orator, and the people who are there belong to Kapotai, and once again to Ngāti Wai. And then coming back into town again is Whakapara, which is on the main road heading north, and the people there are Ngāti Hau, and are descendants of the Ngapuhi chieftain Patuone. When we come back down into the inland here, you can see Ngārara Tunua, which is just outside of the Kamo area, and there's a village that belonged to the people of Ngāti Kahu or Torongare. So Ngāti Kahu or Torongare are an old tribe of this Whangārei area, and and they have their marae at Ngaratunua, but they're also a part of the Ketenikau area, which is on the 3 Mile Bush Road. Coming along the border there, you'll see Pipi Way. A lot of people will say Pipi Way, and so you're confused that there are Pipi over there, which indeed there are not. No, the proper pronunciation is Pipi, as opposed to the short Pipi. Pipi is describes that the water, where the water seeps up from underneath the ground, and so that's where it will take its name. The people there belong to the Hapu Teore Way, and are members of the greater Ngāti Way people, Ngāti Hine people. Coming further around now, we've come over into the Mangakahia Valley and to Parihaki Marae, and the people there are Ngāti Whakahotu, Ngāti Toki, and Ngāti Horahia. Also in the Mangakahia Valley is the Marae Te Tārai o Rahiri, and the people there are Ngāti Tirino, Ngāti Toki, and Ngāti Horahia. Once again, sections of the people who are at Parihaki Marae. And coming down further again is to Parihaka, and to the people of Ngāti Tirino, Ngāti Toki, and Ngāti Horahia. As we come along a little bit more, we'll come to Titoki, and that Titoki is the Marae Korokota, which is occupied by the Parapho people and Te Uriroi people. And so I'm very pleased to see my relatives of Ngāti Te Parapho here today. Coming past Titoki, we come to my home in the Mangakahia Valley, which is Poroti. And people may be familiar with Poroti and some of the claims, the treaty claim that sits around the claim by Māori for proprietary right to water, to fresh water. And so that claim sits within the Poroti Springs. And the people who are there are Te Parapho, Te Uriroi, and a section of the Mahurehure people who come from Waima in the Hokianga Valley. So those are all of my relatives, and this is the reason why when I talk about my home space, my home place, then that's how I describe it, as opposed to just where my house is. It's all that area there, and I don't claim that privilege on my own. All of my people in here are able to stand and make the same claim in terms of our whanaungatanga, or our kinship within this area. I was raised in the Whangārei district. I was very privileged to have spent time with my elders. I didn't think I was very privileged at the time because, whilst all the rest of my mates are outside running around all over the place, I'm having I thought I had to be on call because I thought I was the gopher, you see, because if my old people needed anything, well, they'll send me to go and get it. But having grown, older, I understand that a great part of that was about the transferal of their knowledge and their information, from their own generation down to the next generation. And so this is why I say that now that I'm able to look back and reflect on all of those old people and how things were, I do feel greatly privileged, because not all of my generation are able to say the same thing. There were a lot of changes that were happening to our people back then, and I think that there was a real concerted and conscious move away from the old Māori way in which I had been brought up, and moving towards assimilating, I suppose, to the bigger and wider society. I appreciate all of that now. The knowledge that was handed down to myself and to a couple of my other cousins, I appreciate it because it means that, that we're able to be a link, you know, between today's people and the people of yesterday. So, this is my pepeha, my credencia to the to my claim to being a First Nations person of Aotearoa, of New Zealand. My mountain is Manaia. My ocean is Te Terenga Parawa. My marae, I have several marae here, but I wanted to name this marae because it's the one that many of you will be familiar with. Whangārei Terenga Parawa. The house there is named after the Ngāti Hine chief, Kaka Porowini, who was a very innovative leader of his time. He brought electricity and telephone connection to some of his communities, including here in the villages around Whangārei here. He was a contemporary of people like Suapiranangata, Maui Pomare, and those the leaders of those times, and had a very forward thinking in terms of how he wanted to move his people into the future. And so where the marae is, on Porowini Ave, is right where that meeting house stands, is where his villa house used to be. And his villa house, was quite a large house. It was surrounded on three sides by wide veranda. In the stream that was used to be immediately behind the marae area there, he'd keep a large wooden box in the stream, which they'd fill with eels. And when visitors and people came to his homestead, then he'd have food to be able to feed to his visitors. But back in the days of Kaka Porowini, social relations weren't so fabulous, and when Maori would come to town to Whangārei, they'd come to town either to the hospital, or they'd come to the land court, or whatever their business was here in Whangārei. And some of them, they'd never be able to complete all of that business and then be able to return back to their country homes, which were considerable distance in those days. And so many of them would just go out of town, and they'd set up camp, and they'd camp outside of town. But that would inevitably draw them to the attention of the constabulary. Whether even if something hadn't gone wrong, the police would still come and visit these people who were camped on the outskirts of town. And Kaka felt great aroha, for his people because of that. And so he encouraged them to come to stay in his home. Whenever they came to Whangārei, he'd encourage them to come and stay in the big villa house. So when the marae was built over there, and the dining hall, when it came to naming the dining hall, the people decided that they wanted to name the dining hall to commemorate Kaka's great hospitality to his people, not only to his people, but to all people he showed great hospitality to. So the dining hall of that marae is called Ngā Manakitanga a Kaka. Ngā Manakitanga a Kaka, which means the great hospitality of Kaka. So I just wanted to mention that, because I think that that's an important part that makes up our local landscape, and it also gives us a glimpse, I suppose, into the people landscape, and especially into the Maori people that live within that landscape. As I've already mentioned, my tribes are Te Uririroi, Te Parafau, Ngāti Wai, Te Waiariki, Ngāti Hine, and also the Ngāti Pūkenga people. These Ngāti Pūkenga people are probably the group that that's unusual in that makeup of tribes there, because all of the other tribes that are listed there, except for Ngāti Pukenga, are northern tribes. Ngāti Pukenga is a tribe who comes from the Bay of Plenty, from there to be found at Welcome Bay in Tauranga, in Maketu, and in other places along the seaboard there. However, in the days of my ancestors, through an action that happened here in Whangārei, that land was gifted by the Whangārei tribes here to that tribe, Ngāti Pukenga. So when we talk about all these other tribes here being northern tribes, Ngāti Pukenga is the only one that sits outside of that, even though as individuals today they're just as much a Ngāpuhi as I am. But when they refer back to their own immediate tribal history, then that's where that history will take them back to that name, to Ngāti Pukenga, will take them back into the Bay of Plenty, and even further than that back into where the Tūhoe people are in the Urewera Mountains. And I belong to the Ngāpuhi nation. I belong to several of those nations, but today I choose to name that one. So those are my credentia, and I suppose it helps to give some clarification, as to what right does this person have to stand up and to be talking about all of these things. So the kōrero that I speak is kōrero that comes from my own elders. So my parents, my grandparents, many of my elders were people who carried the stories of the tribes. They carried the stories of the tribes, they carried the genealogies, they carried the rituals. And those were things that were passed on to people like myself. I'm not the only one who received that information, but I'm probably the noisiest one out of all of us. So so that's, to me, I find that to be really special. I consider myself now to be a really special person in terms of being able to transfer that information back through my people. And so many of those stories were heard during the Waitangi tribunal hearings that were held here in Whangārei. Whangārei. This, many of you people will have seen the history boards that go along the Hātea River, along the walk. And so I was really lucky to work with Mim Ringer. And I can see Mim somewhere in here. Yes, there's Mim. Kia ora, Mim. Mim and I both worked on those history boards. Mim told the Pākehā stories, the European stories, and I told the Māori ones. And we brought in one of the young Māori artists, Te Amorangi Hikuroa, and who came in and to replicate or to create the image of Parihaka and the pā, because there were several pā that were attached to Parihaka, and many of those pā came down the hill all the way down to the waterfront, down to the Town Basin. So just above the Olympic swimming pool were pā sites. On what's called the bluff, as you go around as you go past the hotel there on the left-hand side, and you go around the bluff. The bluff was also a pā site, Oruku. And then as you go back up into the Parihaka hills, and then you'll come across other pā sites. So many of our ancestors occupied this land for a very long time, and I'm proud to say that I'm a descendant of theirs. Our occupation of these lands would go all the way back to when the ancestral waka arrived here, And so many of the tribes that live here in Whangārei have been in occupation of these lands since the arrival of the waka. Of course, there's been a lot of developmental changes over those generations, but there are Maori people here whose genealogy will take them all the way back to those people who came here on the ancestral waka. So, in talking about Parihaka, I understand that it's the largest par site in the country, and so a par site, ladies and gentlemen, is a fortress. It's a fortress, and so I suppose when our people came here, it didn't take them very long before they knew that they had to be able to make sure that they're keeping a tight rein or tight hold on their territories, especially because it was important for them to be able to have lands to cultivate. It was important for them to be able to have the forests in which to hunt, the fishing grounds from where to fish, and also in the wetlands and the streams and the rivers. So one of the big thing that shows the wealth of Polynesian people is food. And so that's why we're such a blustery and large-looking people. But food was important. If you were able to show that you had good access to food, then that elevated your mana, and it meant that that your people were certainly living in a very for Whangārei. Many of our elders would refer to Whangārei as being a place of milk and honey, because it had easy access to the ocean, easy access to the forests, and easy access to where all the food was, and the soil was great, because the soil here is volcanic. So, and then we come to Whangārei. So the original Whangārei, ladies and gentlemen, is not where it is at the present moment. The original Whangārei is, or was, out on the out near the entrance to the ocean, somewhere opposite Marsden Point, and was a coastal village where travellers who were travelling up and down the coast would very often pull into that place, either to stay a while in that village or to land at that place so that they were able to go to other points of places of interest that they were travelling to. So I think that whenever people spoke about coming to this area, they would always mention that name there, Whangārei. Whangārei. However, the main village in this place here was called Tawatapiti. And Tawatapiti was a large village that was in the Mayertown area. And of course, in later years, when the European settlers came here, and amongst those, of course, was the Mayer family, and one of the members of that family, Gilbert Mayer, was taken into care by some of the chiefs and the tribes of Whangārei here, and they baptized him in the old Māori way, and they named him Tawa, after the village Tawatapiti. Of course, his family was living on the edge, or they had built their family home on the edge of Tawatapiti, in the area where that's now known as Deveron Street, I think Deveron Street. But Whangārei itself, Whangārei comes from, there's a much larger or longer name for Whangārei. So this is it here. Almost as long as the longest place name in Aotearoa, which is the place down in Hawke's Bay where Tamatea, the explorer and the climber of mountains, played his flute to his sweetheart, which has, I think, about 80 odd letters. This name here has 69 letters. 69 letters, so it's only a few letters off the largest name. Ko te tauwhanga a rei pai, ki ona tu ngane, Kia Takanapu I Te Rangi, Rāua ko Kairangatira, is the full name of that, is the full Whangārei name. It means the waiting place of the ancestress Reipai, the place where she waited for her brothers, for Te Kanapu I Te Rangi and for Kairangatira. So people will perhaps be familiar with the story of the twin sisters Reitu and Reipai, you know, who came from the Waikato area and who were brought north here to marry the chief Ueoneone who lived in Whangape. Now, both of these twin sisters, they were twin sisters, apparently very attractive young women, very resourceful young women, very high-born women, and with all of the skills that go with women of their class. However, when I hear the stories of my elders, I suspect that these two sisters were also feisty vixens because they were very argumentative. And of course, you know, they had been chosen, both of them, to be wives to the chief Ueoneone. So when the Ueoneone's servant bird, you know, brings them north from their home in Waikato, they argued all the way. These two sisters are arguing with each other. And then in the end, the sister Reipai decides, oh, okay, well, I'm going to give up this fight for the handsome Ueoneone. So she makes an excuse that she wants the bird, because if they're coming north on a bird, the bird's only about this big, so you've got to work out, well, how they both fit on the bird. A kārearea is the bird they say that brought them north. When they get here, so Reipai makes the excuse that she wants to get off the bird. She pretends that she has to relieve herself. So she asks the bird to land on the beach below. And so the bird lands at that beach, and that beach becomes known as Te Onerahirahi a Reipai. Te Onerahirahi a Reipai, which today, of course, is Onerahi. And Onerahirahi, or Rahirahi, Taringa Rahirahi, is to hear something that you're not really supposed to hear. And so what happened with Reipai is that she heard the other sister Reitu say some very unsavory remarks about her. So hence the reason that place carries that name today, Te Onerahirahi a Reipai, or the place of Reipai's quick overhearing. So Reipai alights from the bird there. She says to the sister, okay, sister, carry on with the Ueoneone's servant. The Ueoneone is all yours now, and off you go. And I'll wait here for our brothers who are coming across the land with our people to attend the wedding. So hence the reason why you get this name, Te Taufanga a Reipai, or the waiting place of Reipai. Now, you know, sometimes people get very mixed up in the language. So some people say, oh, you know, whanga is a harbour. Maybe the story belongs to the story about the harbour. And I say, well, no, because whanga in this case is another meaning of that word. You see, the Māori language is a contextual language. You can have the same word in several different contexts. It's only by the context that you understand how the word is being used. So whanga in this case is to wait, and a taufanga is a waiting place. The harbour story, of course, is the story that belongs to Te Terenga Prawa. Terenga Prawa, the swimming place of the whales. Because sometimes the great, I told my lecturer once, the great fish of the ocean. And she said, what fish are you talking about? I said, the tohoraha. And she asked the whale. She goes, oh, the whale, she says. Oh, she said, no. She said, that's a mammal. And I said to her, well, it mightn't be a fish, but it is an ika. Because it doesn't necessarily mean that the word fish and the word ika tightly gel together, you know. So there's big meaning within the word ika. So that's what I said to her. I said, oh, that's the greatest ika in the ocean. of course, she wasn't, being my professor, she's an academic, she was very strong to point out, no, a whale is a mammal. Oh, yes, ma'am, but of course, it's an eka. So we didn't come to any agreement on that day, and of course now she's gone to heaven as my old professor, Media Simpson. Now, going back to talking about Parihaka. Parihaka was originally called by us Maori, or I should say us uninformed Maori, would call it Parihaki, because everywhere you looked it was spelled like that, Parihaki, and we'd say, oh, the proper Maori pronunciation is Parihaki. However, my elders from Pehiaweri, from the Glenbervie area, would always talk about Parihaka. And they'd talk about the wars that took place on Parihaka, and they'd talk about the war dances that were performed on the fortifications of Parihaka. And so in the 1980s, a case was made to the Geographic Board to return the proper name back to that mountain. Because even though us not so informed Maori were calling it Parihaki, but really the proper pronunciation of that name on the right hand side there is Parihaki. You see, there was no meaning of Parihaki, and I did see too in some of the stories about that mountain, that once upon a time there was a chief that lived up there and his name was Haki. And I thought, oh, how interesting is a name like Jack. And then of course the para, well, para is like refuse. And I'm thinking, oh, old Jack had some refuse up there. So that's the proper pronunciation of that name, Parihaki. And I'm grateful that our elders, bring us back into the proper story and the proper corridor to do with that mountain. So in the 1980s, they made the elders made an application to the Geographic Board to have the mountain's proper name returned, and that was after a couple of years that was agreed to. All of the elders and the chiefs of the Whangārei area all came together at that time to have this discussion. And so eventually the Geographic Board agreed to that, and so the mountain's proper name has been returned to it, which is Parihaka. So there was a large battle that took place up there, and it's called the Battle of Parihaka. And in that battle, there were several important chieftains, not the least of which was the Waikato chief, eventually to become the first Maori king, Pōtatau. And so there were tribes in that fight who came from the Hauraki area, who came from down in the King Country area, who came from out of Waikato, and they had come here to seek in response to a fight that had taken place in Auckland at Mount Wellington, where some Waikato children were killed, and so they had come here to seek payment or utu for the deaths of those children. Now, when they came here and attacked that pa, they actually worked their way up to what we know as the summit now. So they would have fought their way through those lower pa, and then working their way up to those pa that were on the higher part of the hill there. And how they overwhelmed the pa was that they set fire to the fortifications, to the fencing, set fire to it, and smoked the occupants out. So several of those occupants were or those people were killed. And my grandmother's brother, who was Te Maronoa Mahanga, the last of the old tohunga of this area, in the 1950s, after the Second World War and into the 1950s, and I think even into the early 1960s, his task was to go and retrieve the bones of the dead that had been left lying all those years on Parihaka Mountain and also down in the Whare Valley. And those were taken away and were interred in the tribe's burial places. They're ancient burial places. Some of you will be aware, were in the caves. But after the arrival of European and the taking on of European ways by Maori communities, one of the things that they did was to establish cemeteries like a European cemetery. And so that's where many of those bones were taken to and interred. And some of those, of course, are at the village that I named earlier at Te Toitoi, just as you leave Whangārei. Okay, so those of you who have been up to Parihaka will also have seen that up there are history panels as well. And this is one of those panels that sits on the viewing platform, and those images have been set up to identify, where the different communities are. So, number one, now although you can't see it very clearly here, but number one is the mountain Manaya. Number two is Te Whara, which is the mountain on the opposite side of Manaya. Now, Manaya is an important feature within the landscape of the whole of the north, because it's one of the pillars within the sacred house of the Ngāpuhi Nation. So the sacred house of the Ngāpuhi Nation is described as the floor being Papa Tuanuku, or Mother Earth, and the ceiling being Father Sky. And in a Maori house, those of you who are familiar with the style of a Maori house will know that in the walls are set carved posts of the ancestors. So when they talk about the sacred house of Ngāpuhi, and the posts that they describe inside that house are the mountains, and Manaya is one of those mountains. Manaya, I think, was very significant to my ancestors when they first came here, because when you come into the harbour, when you look at that mountain, it's very reminiscent of the high islands from which those Polynesian ancestors came from. And so, the name Manaya is a name that they brought with them when they came here to Aotearoa. And they put onto that mountain. Hikurangi is another name that they brought with them and put onto on the mountains. On the opposite side of there, of course, as I said, is number two is Te Whara, and is a mountain that is named after the cheeky wife of Manaya, whose name was Te Whara. And so the Ngāti people will say that when the Mātātua Waka came here, and Manaya and his people saw the Mātātua Waka in their area, I suppose they became very defensive, wondering who are these new people who are coming in, are they going to come over and take over our lands? And so Manaya's wife came out, and she turned her back and lifted her skirt and showed her backside to the people of the Mātātua Waka. Now, to do that is highly insulting. And so apparently, being so incensed by that action by Manaya's wife, the tohunga on the Waka Mātātua turned her into stone. So out there is a stone there which they call the Old Lady. So those of you people who are fishermen will know the Old Lady. My father and my uncles, when they return from fishing, very often the first fish of their catch, they'd leave it there for the Old Lady. That's just to ensure that they have luck when they go back out fishing again. There's also a mountain out there, mountain number 3, which is Matariki in the area where I think it's called Mount Lion. Matariki, and Matariki, of course, named after the cluster of stars that make up the Pleiades. Thank you. When you come further on in, and you see that number 4 there is Rangitihipa. And Rangitihipa is an interesting place. Rangitihipa, where the Rangitihipa is now, is the area that's occupied by the Ngāti Pukenga people that I was talking about earlier. But below Rangitihi, when Kalenso was moving across the land, he came across a group of people who are living on the shore there below Rangitihipa at Tamatera or Waikaraka, some of you may be familiar with. And he came across these people. They were cooking potatoes in this container. And when he looked closer at this container, he could see that it was actually, it was a ship bell. And so what it has become, that ship bell, what it has become is one of the mysteries of this country, of Aotearoa, New Zealand, in that he identified it as a Tamil ship bell. So the question, I guess, is just how did that bell get here? Because those people claim to have had the bell for a long time, and when he inquired from them where did they find it, they said, well, they found it underneath a tree that had collapsed. So it would suggest then that at some point in time, in the early mists of time, that a Tamil ship actually arrived here in the Whangārei harbour. Whangārei Terenga Parawas, number 5 is the moana. And then further on over, number 6 is Te Huringa a Kawharu. Te Huringa a Kawharu. Te Huringa Kawharu is the Brendowan Ranges. And so Kawharu is a well-known ancestor within the stories of the local people, and especially within the stories of the people of Ngāti Whātua and the Kaipara, as many of them are descended from Kawharu. And at some point in time, Kawharu is supposed to have journeyed this way and then turned around at that point and gone back. So hence the reason why they call it Te Huringa, or the place where Kawharu turned. Te Whara. Oh, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong. Rangiora is number 7. Rangiora is the mountain of the people of Takahiwai, out of Ruakaka. And I'm also pleased to see some of the Patuharakeke people of Takahiwai here today. So their mountain, Rangiora, is also the name that they have given to their meeting house on the marae there at Takahiwai. Coming down into number 8 is the river of Hātea. There's some discussion at present as to whether the name is actually Hātea or whether it's Hōteo. You see, I suppose that's one of the issues that happened back in those days, is where Māori names become deteriorated, such as what happened with the name Parihaka. It's a similar situation with the mountain that they call Tutamoe over in the Dargaville area, where the actual pronunciation of that name is Tutemui. Tutemui is its proper name. But it's very easy for Māori names to become deteriorated, through mispronunciation. And so those are all other areas that that are in that area there. I won't go through all of them, but because some of you at some point might want to visit the summit of Parihaka and be able to see those things there yourselves. This image brings us into the Western Hills area. So down the bottom there you can see number 13. And the bridge Te Matau Apohe. So From Parihaka, when you look down onto Te Matawa Pohe, you can see that it's a large flat area that's ringed by mangrove bush. And originally, on that flat sand land there was an island, a small island. And the name of the island was Te Matau. Te Matau. One of the important rangatira of that island was Tangiika, and I understand that it's also the place where Tangiika created fish hooks out of the bones of his enemies. So that was a common practice among Polynesian people, where they would, the bones of their enemies, they'd make fishing implements or even musical instruments from out of those bones. So hence the reason why that little island was called Te Matau, or the hook. With the establishment of the Māori Land Court several generations later, and so the Māori Land Court is looking to see, well, who are the owners of this place? And the chieftain who was awarded ownership of that little island was a chieftain known as Pohe. So hence the reason why Te Matau becomes known as Te Matau a Pohe, or the fish hook of Pohe, even though the fish hook story comes several generations earlier than Pohe himself. So that island would have been in the area where the rock and roll club is on that place there. Okay, number 17 here, koutou mā, is Pukawakawa Pa. Pukawakawa. Pukawakawa Pa is where the hospital is now. There was a large pa there, and you know, Whangārei is a area that has several limestone features, and that was certainly that's certainly the case with that area where the hospital is. People who have got homes up there, you know, have been able to incorporate the limestone features into their gardens. But Pukawakawa Pa was an important pa in the Whangārei district. And you see, originally this whole area was occupied by the Ngai Tahuhu people, who were eventually overwhelmed by the Ngāpuhi nation. So those of us people who, tangata whenua people of Whangārei now, we are the descendants of the conquered and the conquerors. So Pukawakawa Pa was one of those places. It's also a place where a very interesting tradition or custom took place, which is called Taua Wahine. Taua Wahine. Taua Wahine is a party of negotiators that has been made up of women. So Ngāpuhi had only, at this time that I'm talking about now, Ngāpuhi had only recently come in and occupied these lands. The close relatives of those people who they had expelled were the Ngāti Wai people. And so Ngāti Wai, many of them at this time had returned from some venture that they had been down to in the south. And when they arrived here in Whangārei, they set up camp in the area where Countdown is now, down by the warehouse. They camped in that area. They knew that the political situation was a little bit dicey. They sent word. So they gathered up these chiefly women, and their role was to go to the pa of Pukawakawa and to advise the chiefs there that Ngāti Wai was travelling across the land. They didn't want to be interfered with. They hadn't come here to fight or anything like that. They didn't want to be interfered with. They were simply travelling across the land so that they could return back to their lands in Whangaruru. However, and so the chief negotiator of that taua wahine, or group of women negotiators, was the sister of the chief of the Pukawakawa Pa, and her husband was a Ngāti Wai chieftain. And so she was the main speaker of those negotiators, and she said to them, you know, because before they entered the pa, they had stopped at the Kirikiri stream below the hospital, and there they prepared this chiefly woman in her chiefly garments. But the most unusual feature of her whole presentation were these hair buns that they had tied on her head, Māori called pūtiki. And so there were 8 of them on her head that had been tied onto her head. And so the real message of her, while she was going through the negotiation process, was that, you know, the Ngāti Wai people have come here, they haven't come here, they're crossing the land, they haven't come here to interfere with you, and we're asking to be allowed to cross the land without interference. Because if you do interfere with us, for each hair or each putiki that's been tied to my head, my husband has 100 men. Well, you know, that's an army of 800. So, however, the occupants of the pa didn't take any notice of that chiefly negotiator, much to their own folly at the end of the day, because a great battle took place here in Whangārei, and the battle carried on all the way from here, because the Whangārei tribes chased the Ngāti Wai people all the way back to Whangaruru, to Punaruku. And when they got there, the armies engaged in their fighting, but amongst them were 2 very important and well-known warriors. One of those, the Ngāti Wai warrior, was Rangitu Kiwaho, and the local warrior from Whangārei here was Te Tirarau the First, not to be confused with Te Tirarau the Third, who signed the Treaty of Waitangi, but Te Tirarau the First, his Tirarau the Third's grand uncle. Now, when these 2 warriors confronted each other, they engaged in their fighting, and because they were such famous warriors, you know, everybody had heard about them. All of the armies came to a standstill. They came to a standstill while these 2 men fought. They fought each other along the path to the edge of the river, and then the 2 of them fell into the river. They fought in the river. Both of them went underneath the water, but only one of them came back to the top, and that was the Ngāti Wai chief, Rangitu Kiwaho. Te Tirarau was killed in that foray. Now, the people were so, you know, they admired the fighting skill. They admired the fighting skill, because to be a fighter in those old people's time, you had to be skilled. You had to be skilled at what you did. You know, in later years, the chief Kawiti called the gun the weapon of slaves, because you see, there was no honor in fighting with the gun. You simply needed to just lift the barrel, pull the trigger, and your enemy was gone. But to be a skilled warrior with the patu, with the taiha, with the tefa, with those old weapons of the Māori, you know, if you're good at that, then you're good. And if your enemy goes down, then you're to be admired, as well as the enemy who's gone down. Both of these men were greatly admired for their fighting skill. So now, how did I get over to there? Pukawakawa, that's right, Pukawakawa. So there's an interesting little bit of history about Pukawakawa, and the Māori practice of bringing together female negotiators to be able to go out and negotiate with an enemy tribe, you know, for their people. So that's not an isolated incident. It's there was several historical incidents right throughout the whole country where women negotiators were brought together to negotiate the bringing about of peace between warring factions. Okay. So the last one I want to talk about now is Parihaka. So Parihaka is after you've left Kamo and you're going along the flat area there before you start to climb the hill going towards where Fonterra is. And up on the left-hand side are the high hills of Parihaka, up in the area where the Buddhist monastery is now. And so Parihaka was a place where our people would go to hunt the Polynesian rat. The Polynesian rat had good habits. You know, well, I don't know, maybe we might say they had good habits, but I don't know if the Kiore would have thought it had good habits, because one of the ways that you would catch them was that they'd always travel on the same track. And so there were those tracks were up on Parihaka, on the cliff faces of Parihaka. And so our people would go there and hunt the Kiore, because, you know, before the arrival of the European, you know, there wasn't too much meat except for birds and fish. Of course, if you were a chief, you had a dog that you might be able to knock off for a feed. And then, of course, you had the Kiore. So the Kiore was an important part of their diet, and that was the place in Whangārei here where they would hunt for them. So, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know whether I've gone past my time. I'm right on time. Okay. Yeah. So you know that gives you great pleasure and great delight to be able to come here and talk about these things, because I think it's only by hearing the stories, can we appreciate each other. You know. Can we appreciate each other? And it's important for us to appreciate each other and to have an understanding of each other. There's so many wonderful things that are happening now, you know, within communities, but the most important thing, I think, is finding ways where you bring people together. And I'm greatly pleased to see how everybody has come together this afternoon into this corridor. I was originally traumatized, but I'm much happier now. I'm much happier now. Okay. In country.
Well, I'd like to say on behalf of all of us, I don't think I have words in English or Māori to say how much I appreciate it on behalf of all of us what you've done for us. It has been wonderful, so thank you so much. And I'll just give you that as a gesture of my thank you.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou katoa te aroha, kua tukuna mai kia hau tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Yari te hape, e maiwi e haere mai, tarpa, ai! Haere mai, haere mai, haere mai.
Toro mai Torina. So our first song was a song of welcome and acknowledgement to everybody who's arrived here. The second song, Tahine Tanukino, was a love song. So there might be some sweethearts out there for us singing. And our last song is a song of greeting, Toro mai Tori. Hirero, hope. Toro mai